Okay. So this should be going, connecting to software. We're going live. We're live. All right. Gonna post this thing here. For anyone in the voice chat, let me know how the audio is working. Hopefully it is working. But I don't know. Okay, so there's one viewer. I'm just gonna keep an eye on the voice chat, but it should be working because we just tested it out. But hey, everybody. This is book club where we are reading The Wretched of the Earth. Before we begin, I have a question that maybe I should have asked you guys before we started streaming. Maybe not. I don't know. But basically, have you guys played Resident Evil? Do you guys know what Resident Evil is? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, you do, Caressa. Do you do Clark? Do you Lectin, Saber, Sam? Do you guys know what Resident?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember like when was the last one I actually played. I remember playing a couple of the demos, but then also like I have this like really distinct memory of being like terrified of being in this house and like this walking person is just chasing me. I don't know why. Like that's just stuck in my head. Like yeah, I couldn't kill him for some reason. I couldn't change the camera. That's what I remember.
That is terrifying. When you're a kid, that stuff sticks with you. Yeah. So have you seen like all the memes for the new Resident Evil game?
Yeah.
Okay. You have Canessa. Have you?
Like the new like trailer that came out, or like the actual like the previous or the latest game that's actually released?
So there's these memes of this very tall lady in a dress.
Oh,
okay.
Yes. Have you guys seen these memes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, I remember.
So like I am trying to make. I'm trying to make a like video. I was like, who is this tall lady? I have to find out because that's what everyone wants to know. Who is this tall lady? So I started to make a video being like, okay, I'm just going to watch the cutscene. It's going to be a reaction video. But then I realized you had to play Resident Evil 7 to play Resident Evil 8.
Yeah.
So I'm like actually like looking up all these videos for lore. And it's kind of a lot of work. Would you guys be interested in me making a video figuring out who is this tall lady? Because it's a lot more work than I thought it would be. But if people would be interested, then I'm like, yeah, I'm going to make this video. And it's going to be kind of sloppy, but it's going to be fun. But if people aren't interested in who this tall lady is, then I'm not going to make a video about it because it's a lot of work. What do you guys think?
I think the popularity for it is like leveling out a little bit. I've watched all of 7, I think, or know most of the lore from 7 into 8 and how they're connected. So I know about it. I was obsessed with the memes myself. So I think people would be somewhat interested if they haven't heard of Resident Evil. Because I know it was like the meme was everywhere and they might not know of her. The people who do already know a lot.
That's true. Okay. That makes sense. Lectin, Saber, Clark, Sam, do you have any?
You know, I'd be interested to hear like your thoughts on, like, because it seems like the kind of appearance of the character, right? There's a tall, you know, not the skinniest person in the world, stuff like that. It kind of seems like strange how I saw a video of someone talking about how like the sort of comparison between this person and like Meg the Stallion. It was a strange comparison. Basically, make that like. You know, people are sort of shaming someone like Meg Thee Stallion for being tall and like not the skinniest person in the world, but then there's this person that in Resident Evil that's has all of those traits except they're white person, so it's fine or something like that. That was a very interesting take that I saw, and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But like beyond that, I don't really know anything about the actual character.
I literally just want to figure out who she is, but there's like all these lore videos that are like a little bit too long for me. So I just want to make like a fast one. I don't know. It seems like, I don't know. Hey, Jeremy, we're just talking about Resident Evil 8. Yeah.
Never played it.
Yeah, I mean, I got into like an hour into like I got an hour and a half into these videos. I spent like 3 hours making this already, and I'm already like invested in it. But then I was like, wait, this is a lot of work. So I don't know. I might just like quickly just like wrap it up and have an awkward video and be like, whatever. This has nothing to do with leftism. But yeah, anyways, onwards to the Wretched of the Earth. I'm gonna see if there's any comments or anything. The audio should be working. I'm super excited about that. No comments or anything. But yeah, anyone who is watching, if they could just leave a comment saying that the audio is working, that'd be super helpful, because every time I try this, it's messed up. But I think this is it today. So, for anyone watching, we're reading The Wretched of the Earth. We're reading the conclusion mostly, and then we're going to go over it. And then I want to save about 15 minutes for us to talk about what we're going to be reading next. If anyone would like to find these podcast kind of book club things, you can find them on my YouTube channel, and they're going to be on the playlist called Book Club. They're not going to be in the regular video spot. Before we begin, if anyone wants to talk about their YouTube channel or writings or something like that, just be like, hey, this is who I am. This is my channel. Yeah, Sam, do you want to start off with you, if you have anything?
Yeah, so yeah, I write lefty articles for Medium. You can find me as Sam Young. Recently, I wrote a thing about, Rojava, or North and East autonomous administration in Syria, and then I sent that to like this Polish guy who's like some hardcore libertarian dude, and he was just like, oh, you know, it'll never work because of human nature, and that made me really upset. So then I wrote an article about like socialism and human nature, and then like, oh, that's so good. But yeah, so that's what I've been working on.
That's awesome.
He's making the argument, human nature argument. Like, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll post that in the text chat then.
Saber, do you want to talk about your channel a little bit?
Oh, yeah. I make Afrofuturist video essays. I have at least one planned for today. I mean, well, today, this month. To be a collaboration with someone pretty cool. I'll leave that as a surprise for those who are interested. But yeah, no, in terms of like plug, I guess I'll plug the stream that I did yesterday with Silver Street and a few other indigenous comrades talking about space and decolonizing space and cyberpunk and solarpunk and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's fun.
That's awesome. Vanessa, do you want to talk about your channel?
Yeah, it's just a little playthrough channel that I do, not politics based or leftism based, just stuff I do for fun. That's a Cursed Queen.
Nice. Anything else that I missed? Does anyone else have anything that they would like to talk about that they're working on? All right. Well, let us get started. We're going to dive right into this thingy here. We're going to talk about The Wretched of the Earth. Dun, dun, dun. So, we were pretty much just finishing up the book. We read From the North African's Criminal Impulsiveness to the War of National Liberation and the conclusion today. So, we're kind of just wrapping up here. I feel like he said a lot of stuff that that Fanon has previously said in his book. So in this chapter, Professor, I'm gonna say Poirot, because he's French or something. Yeah. And there was a detective show called Poirot. He had like a mustache and stuff. So anyways, I'm assuming that's how you say this name. So Professor Poirot and others wrote on Algerians being inherently violent. So Fanon in this part is talking about how I'll just read it because it's actually like really gross. It's really like messed up. So this is on page 222 if anyone wants to look at it. So it says the Algerian is a habitual killer. It's a fact. The magistrates will tell you that 4/5 of the cases heard involved assault and battery. The crime rate in Algeria is one of the highest in the world, they claim. There are no petty delinquents when the Algerian, and this applies to all North Africans, puts himself on the wrong side of the law, he always goes to extremes. The Algerian is a savage killer, and his weapon of choice is the knife. The magistrates who know the country have elaborated their own theory on the subject. The Kabyles, for example, Did I say that right? I butchered it, didn't I? Anyway, it's Kabyles, Kabyles. For example, prefer a revolver or shotgun. The Arabs from the plains have preference for the knife. Some magistrates wonder whether the Algerian does not have a need to see blood. The Algerian, they will tell you, needs to feel the heat of blood and steeps himself in the victim's blood. These magistrate and police officers very seriously hold forth on the connections between the Muslim psyche and blood. A number of magistrates even go so far as to say that killing a man for an Algerian means first and foremost slitting his throat. The savagery of the Algerian manifests itself in particular by the number of wounds, many of them inflicted unnecessarily after the victim's death. Autopsies undeniably establish this fact. The killer gives the impression he wanted to kill the incalculable number of times, given the equal deadliness of the ones inflicted. The Algerian is a senseless killer. And then I'm going to skip down, but it says, finally, robbery by an Algerian is always breaking and entering, in some cases involving murder, in every case involving assault of the owner. And so, yeah, this is basically just a list of talking about like how Poirot describes the Algerian, and it's like saying that these people are inherently senseless. And it also says in 223 in like the middle bottom, he is immune to nuances. Cartesianism is fundamentally foreign to him, and moderation, a sense of proportion and level-headedness are contrary to his inner nature. And I feel like Fanon this whole time has been talking about how colonizers paint the colonized as these inhumane people. And personally, there's just something that really stuck with me because, like, just being seen, like, whenever I get upset being seen as the angry black woman, I'm often seen as like an aggressive person, and then that makes me aggressive because I'm just like, well, fuck it, you're gonna see me as this like aggressive angry person anyways, like now I actually am aggressive and angry, go fuck yourself. And so like it's not an extreme where people have like assumed I'm a killer, but like just being a black person and then growing up around white people where white people just see themselves as innocent and see black people as some sort of like monstrosity or something. Like there was a way where I just related to it. But are there any thoughts on this, on how Poirot is painting the Algerians?
Yeah, I wanted to say in relation to what you were talking about recently, where it came out about the NFL lying about or conflating the numbers of the intellectual capabilities of the black football players. So when they make claims, like medical claims about brain injuries, they're more easily dismissed because they're operating off of basically like race realism data to deny their claims. And it kind of reminded me of that just recently came out.
Oh my gosh. I did not know that. That seems so extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the silver lining is that it's being found out, and those claims that were dismissed are being, brought back up, so that way they could get maybe some peace with it, because CTE and other brain injuries and physical injuries are very common in football, and to be denied a claim when you're suffering something like that is detrimental to you, basically. And to know that it's being inflicted on the black players more is not really surprising, but it is very disappointing.
Yeah, especially for like, I mean, I feel like the NFL is like a multi-million-dollar, maybe even billion-dollar
industry. Yeah,
yeah, it's like
industry.
You can't just afford some healthcare.
Afford to take care of them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Well, that was very upsetting.
And I wanted to add to that. On that note, because also with this the NFL thing that you brought up, this is like what really gets me about the Poirot, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, thing, is that we'll be in these systems where it's like everyone knows and can, or I shouldn't say everyone, but most people know and can acknowledge, okay, this is wrong. But like what's really necessary then is like the strong backlash where it's like we have to rid this ideology that like it doesn't seem to happen from the people that actually have like influence to take action on it. Like I think about how the backlash when the NFL was getting really heavily criticized, it was coming from the black fans and players, like a small number of black players, when it really should have been like, a bunch of white fans being like, hey, all these people that I'm a fan of, they're they're being spoken about in all these horrible ways. They're subjected to all this terrible treatment by the police, and by their own company. And it's like, I'm a fan of this product. I should be the one that's like really leading the charge on this. And like for the French and everything like that, it should be like, we're aware that we're treating these people horribly, and like I feel like it doesn't take that much to be like, we can acknowledge that this is bad and we should change something, and we should just like get together and do it. So that was my takeaway from it.
Yeah, like I don't really understand what is up with that, because it's like, I feel like when you hear about K-pop and how horribly K-pop singers are treated, like the fans are like, this is messed up. Can we just not do this? But like with the NFL, for example, like something like this where it's like the NFL like not wanting to like pay for like brain damage and stuff like that, and then also just police brutality towards black people. Like white people are like, keep it out of sports, and you're like, what? Like you guys are fans of these people, and it's just really, I feel like for a lot of different things, like when you're fans of something, you're like, I really care about these people. But for black people, it's like actually feels like really dehumanizing, where it's just like, shut up and play. And it really bothers me, and it just makes me really angry. And
One that kind of stuck out to me in what you read is just the whole idea of like senseless, right? It's like, I don't know if it's just me like not really understanding like what he's trying to say, but like I don't know how you can really come to the conclusion that it's just like entirely senseless, considering the other thing that's going on. That would be a favorite conditions for them to be there in the first place, right? So I don't really know why like it's so hard for them to acknowledge that.
yeah, that's actually a good segue into the next thing that I have. But the next note that I have is basically saying like Fanon is saying that people are violent because of fucking colonialism. Like that's why. It's like, it really it just reminds me again like the Black Lives Matter thing, where it's like, like people, like the first time this happened with Mike Brown, people burned down a Walgreens or CVS or something. And then the news was like, these violent people, they're just burning things down indiscriminately. And it's like, yeah, because this is in protest to police brutality. Like they always leave that part out. Or like when people burn down the police station, it's like, yeah, because people are angry about police brutality. That's why people are being violent. But then people just paint people being mindlessly violent and like being like these savages. And it's really frustrating because like you just can't win, because like you're either just like complacent and then you lose your humanity and trying to adjust into a system that's racist against you, or you fight against that system and you're painted as a mindless savage, and you just can't win. But there was a quote that was on 231 where Fanon starts to talk about why people are being violent. And so he says, it's at the very bottom, I can recall one horrible scene. It was in Oran in 1944. From the military camp where we were waiting to embark, the soldiers threw bits of bread to some Algerian children who fought for them in a frenzy of rage and hatred. A veterinarian could no doubt explain these events in terms of the famous pecking order, noted in farmyards where the corn is bitterly fought over. The strongest birds gobble up all the grain, with less aggressive grow visibly thinner. Any colony tends to become one vast farmyard, one vast concentration camp, where the only law is that of the knife. And there was another one actually right before that. But I guess we can talk about that one too. But there's another quote that kind of ties into this that I'll read in a little bit. But yeah, like he's talking about just how people can't really survive under this kind of colonial rule where people are literally fighting over food, and that's why there's so much violence, because people are just trying to live at this point. Any thoughts on that?
I would say from reading the text, it's like if you're in a comfortable position in your station in life, you don't really, you can't really differentiate crime from survival. And I think he says that no crime is too petty for a loaf of bread. None is. You know, the little things that people go, well, why not just solve it with words? Why not just, you know, make more money kind of thing? But when you're in that position, it's not about the morals of the situation. Your needs aren't being met.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll do anything for your children. And it says in one part, you know, a man comes home and he's tired and the children are hungry in the next room crying, because it's like that's life for them. So boiling it down to crime and violence of people is very like a distancing thing, I think, of like not understanding it, choosing not to.
Yeah, anyone else want to jump in? Also, if it's not super loud, it might be helpful to just leave the mics on, just so we can all kind of hop in.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was talking to my friend recently, and she has, her partner is from San Salvador, and she was talking about how he was part of one of the gangs there. And he was talking about like how, you know, he kind of thought about, you know, if he hadn't been part of one of these gangs, then he would have been part of, like, he would have been a police officer. Like his dad was in the Marines, I think. And I think there's kind of like this. I mean, I guess this isn't, you know, he doesn't really talk about like structurally, like if there's like any sort of like organized crime in like these colonial areas or anything like that. But I think it's kind of interesting, just kind of the way that the state legitimizes violence in a way that, like, you know, like kind of, you know, I think about like the Godfather series, where it kind of like makes all these comparisons between, you know, like kind of like the way the mafia works and the way that the government works, and they are kind of like different ways of like dealing with like, I guess like conflict resolution, and a lot of the time, like, you know, these like these colonial states are really, really brutal, right? They have no problem using violence, but they have this kind of like this like ethical, moral framework that puts it so that like whenever they use violence, it's just inherently legitimate, and whenever other elements use violence, it's inherently illegitimate. And yeah, I guess that's kind of my point there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and geez. And when I kind of tie this into the ways in which, like, for example, like near the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, one of like a rather notorious like person that's known for stealing was caught and was killed. And there was an interview that was done within the community to sort of ask about like what they thought of the person. And generally speaking, the people were fine with him because he was the quote unquote sole breadwinner in his family, right? He was the one that was like bringing in food for them. So like, sure, you might say, oh well, you know, this person, like, why is he stealing? It's like, well, because his family needs food, and that specific area has an over 70% unemployment rate, right? Like you're talking about a group of people that just don't have too many means to really do much else, and so like what else are they supposed to do, right? What exactly do we expect of them? And also, like as you were talking about just now, if you're talking about the history of types of gang activity that have existed, usually the gangs are far more accepted than like various government activity. Why? Because oftentimes they actually do provide for the community in ways that are not provided for by the government. There's a specific case of this, I'm blanking on his name right now, where he would literally send the kids to school. He would ensure that everyone was properly fed. He would like organize like Child's Day celebrations and stuff like that, just to make sure that everyone was happy and was taken care of. So when the government was saying, okay, well, we're going to go for this person, and they sent buses to get some people out so that they'd be safe and wouldn't be in like, you know, potentially in the line of fire. No one left the community because they were so they were so trustworthy of this person. So yeah, I do agree that like oftentimes we are put in these positions to do certain types of things, and sometimes there are even forms of organizing that end up occurring within the communities that are more beneficial to the community than what is existent already. And if you look at it from like a purely, if you look at it outside of its context, it might seem like some terrible thing. But when you consider the fact that there aren't too many other like material options for these people, you kind of realize like, well, maybe the solution would be to, at the very least, provide other options rather than to vilify people that are simply trying to survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other thoughts before we move on to the next section? All right. Oh, someone say something? No? Okay. So, yeah, I think this section was kind of just talking about how, like, just, again, the racism of colonizers being like, I don't understand why these people are violent. It's probably because they're lesser humans. And then, again, Franz Fanon being like, actually, it's because of you pieces of shit. So, the conclusion, in my notes I put, in the name of spiritual adventure, Europe has brought the rest of the world to a halt. So I really like how he phrased this. I mean, honestly, if we're being realistic, it's for capitalism and to have more resources and to have control over people so they can have control over those resources. But I like that he points out the word spiritual adventure, like because I think that there's also like this part of like the way that white people so often frame it. And I'm speaking especially like the US. Like the US had this thing called Manifest Destiny, where there's like these god awful pictures of like an angel being like, we're entitled to this land, where all these indigenous people are on, and they're just like pushing all these people off their land. Like, it's awful. For everyone else, this sucks. But for all these like white people, they're like, it's an adventure. And you're like, no, for everyone else, it's a nightmare. You guys need to cut it out. And so I do appreciate him phrasing it like that. And in this conclusion, I'm just going to skip to the last page because I think it kind of sums up the conclusion pretty well. So on 239, he says, if we want to transform Africa into New Europe, America into New York, then let us entrust the destinies of our countries to the Europeans. They'll do a better job than the best of us. But if we want humanity to take one step forward, if we want to take it to another level than the one where Europe has placed it, then we must innovate. We must be pioneers. If we want to respond to the expectations of our people, we must look elsewhere besides Europe. Moreover, if we want to respond to the expectations of the Europeans, we must not send them back a reflection, however ideal, of their society and their thoughts that periodically sickens even them. For Europe, for ourselves, and for humanity, comrades, we must make a new start, develop a new way of thinking, and endeavor to create a new man. So that is the conclusion, and I really feel like Fanon is saying that, Europe is trying to take over the world and colonize everyone. And if we want the world to be Europe, then yeah, let's continue doing that. But if we want humanity to move forward, then we're going to have to be pioneers of a new future. Because again, we can't really go back to how things were. We can only make a new future after colonization. So those are my thoughts on that. Does anyone have anything to add?
Yeah, and honestly, that specific part does definitely sound like a call for self-determination to say, well, each region needs to very much determine the way in which it will develop beyond this point, because the very problem has always been the fact that someone was determined another place would underdevelop. And yeah, so that's the main thought. Yeah, it's just self-determination and looking towards ensuring that the people of a specific region are the ones that determine the future.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, on that point, I've been dwelling on this a lot, is that, like, I don't know, how to conceptualize the dichotomy between it being self-determination on, like, an individual level, where you're looking at, like, your own neighborhood, your community, your nation, like, the things that you have an actual immediate impact over, and, like, also thinking about it in this global context. book, it's like Fanon is like very much focusing on like his own experiences in the region and like who he can personally interview. But it's like, do we need to think bigger than that, or I'm not really sure. What do y'all think?
Well, I think he mentioned in like we were talking about this like I think we are talking about like do you guys remember like talking about like China and how China's like kind of coming into African countries and basically colonizing stuff, and how people like need bridges was the example, but then they're like contracting that out to China, and just like I forgot like where we ended up on that, but I know we were like talking about just kind of like the influence of the global community and how kind of crushing that is. I don't know if that's.
I think we kind of touched on like how a country's independence is more important than like going in and giving them resources isn't really helpful, because there's an expectation of give and take, and even with like things like trade, it's this other more powerful country is looking around at things that they want to like commodify or whatever, so they're not really interested in helping the people there. They're mostly interested in the relationship down the line. And the call Fanon makes would be like, it has to come from within to start make a new man ground up. You can't take really the hand of, in this case, the Europeans and build yourself up from that, because that obviously doesn't work. Don't take the torch and move it forward. You have to start your own.
Yeah. And Fanon does talk about how like the global communities like need to stop colonize. I think for like Fanon, because like there's this thing that happens where like when people try to make their own autonomy and try to make this ideal kind of like socialist society, you have like these other countries that prey on them, like whether they're making the ideal socialist society or not. Like there's all these other countries in the global community who can put pressure on them, who can take some sort of ownership through capitalism. And Fanon is like, hey, like this just needs to stop. Like there needs to be some sort of like global like gathering where everyone agrees to cut this out, stop preying on the developing countries, and let them have their own autonomy so they can decide what to do. And then I think if that happens, like if the world is like, okay, this is messed up, we just all need to collectively agree to cut this out and let these help these, pay reparations to these developing countries. That's something that Fanon says it needs to happen. And then also like back off. And then if that happens, then I think these individual countries could kind of decide what their own future would be. But I don't know if that's exactly what you're getting at, Jeremy. I don't know. Does that sound?
Oh, it is. Yeah, but and I think that's like a good idea and sort of a start, but not a conclusion, because like Sam, I think, posted in the text chat, there's this person from Trinidad that was discussing all of these things, and my family's also from Trinidad.
Was it say Andrew?
Was it Andrew?
I think so. Yeah.
I don't remember who it was.
Shout out! He's a really good YouTuber.
Yeah, and so I was listening to that. It was a great video. But then also thinking about like Trinidad's situation, it's like they got independence from a lot of diplomacy. Like it wasn't really like the sort of bloody war that we see in Haiti. But I was recently listening to like another podcast where there were a bunch of different people surveyed around the nation, like asking, do you feel like Trinidad is an independent country? And like the overwhelming majority of the answer was like, not really. We're really still a colony. We're just like trying to kind of live through it. To the point where it's like you can be self-determined and also see that on the grand scale, like you need to think bigger than yourself, because like you're, even when you're self-determined, you're still living in like a microcosm, or like an ecosystem rather, where you're not really making your own future.
Yeah. There's this chapter where Fanon talks about how the power has to be given specifically to, I think he uses the word peasants, but I always feel weird about that word because I think of like aristocracy and they're like peasants. But I think like in economic terms, it's like people who are like in the rural areas, and but he talks about like those people because they're the masses, at least where he is. And I think specifically when he says peasants, like he's talking about like it has to be the masses who have the power. So like he in earlier chapters he talks about how like after colonization, and then when people are, you know, decolonized, those places are still very much colonized, and they don't really have their freedom. And so I think Fanon's solution to this is to um, decentralize the power from, because you so after colonization, like you still have the bourgeois class still in control, and I think this is like the main problem for Fanon, where it's like the power has to be in the hands of the masses of people to decide the future. It can't be this continuation of the bourgeois class ruling. And so I think that would be a solution to like truly take away the colonial power, in addition of course to the global community actually backing off. Yeah, any thoughts on that?
I guess one thing that kind of comes to mind, or a question, I guess, is that like, how exactly would we get to a point where for example, the European powers would back off? Because it's like the main reason why is because of resources. And if they can't get those resources, then like they're just not going to like give that up like willingly. So yeah, I'm trying to think about like how exactly that would, how we sort of move in that direction. But like it kind of links to what I was talking about yesterday, and how like there's now this race for space to try to get resources in, you know, on the asteroid belt or whatever, to try to like meet the needs of people now and like people in the future, or whatever Jeff Bezos is saying these days. So it's like, you know, even in a situation like that where they seem to be trying to like mine asteroids to get those resources, will still require so much resources from the global south anyways, that it will just, you know, require a continued like, exploitation of that will continue for like decades on. And so like, yeah, I suppose there's a question like how would we move to a point where they can actually back off? Like, would it? Because it doesn't seem like it would come from just, you know, asking. You know, so yeah. So what do you think? Like, how do we move in that direction?
I think he's saying violence, like that when people.
Well, I guess that's the first like sentence of the book, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you're asking in a more sustainable sense, right?
Yeah, I suppose so. Like, is there any like? So obviously, like, he's making the point that like decolonization is always a violent thing, right? So I'm kind of curious as to like, does anyone have any like other kinds of solutions that you think would also be, that might be applicable to like the 21st century where we are right now, in regards to like the tools and technologies that we have, that may not require that violence, perhaps, or maybe not as much. Because obviously he's in the mid 20th century, things have changed since then. So I'm kind of curious about that.
I think more so technology ends up being a detriment because there's like this need to lean on it as our savior. Like recently, I don't know if you guys know Elon Musk and his wife Grimes. She made a video talking about how AI can do communism essentially. Like we should just give over all our responsibilities to AI, and because AI is an unbiased machine, it will do everything correctly. It doesn't think about race. It doesn't think about, you know, bodies or anything like that. It's just give it something to do and it will do it. But she leaves out and neglects to think about the people who would control that AI and what their motivations would be behind having an AI that would control everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think cynicism and apathy a lot are something that happens in people who are, I think we talked about it before, and it's in the book as well, who are comfortable in their current situation. They do feel bad about what's happening in the global south. They do feel bad what's happening in their own countries with people who are poor and struggling, but they kind of have the cynicism of, well, what am I going to do about it? You know, I have to work and I have to do these things, so why is it up to me? It should be up to our leaders. We should be able to tell them what they want, what we want, and they execute. And there's not, you know, that a lot maybe has changed since the writing of the book, but reading it, I felt a lot of similar connections with what's happening now. It's just happening in different ways.
I mean, we already have an AI. It's called capitalism.
Yeah,
I mean,
it operates.
you know, like if you just, I mean, if you
biased.
I mean, if you give some distributed intelligence a goal, then like it'll be very good at pursuing that goal. But you have to question like, what is the goal you're pursuing? You know, and like, I mean, the biases are in the system. Like, what data are you feeding it? And I guess my problem with a lot of these things is that I don't think you can escape geopolitics. I mean, this is something that, I mean, even like, you know, talking about like the autonomous administration of North and East Syria, that like they have like this new idea of like democratic confederalism, like this decentralized, you know, almost like as close to direct democracy or getting closer to direct democracy. Even then, they can't escape geopolitics because they have to still sell like all of their oil to the United States. You know, they need to make sure that, you know, Turkey doesn't destroy them. They have to negotiate with the regime. I guess I don't see this like, okay, let's cut ourselves off from the rest of the world thing working. I mean, the only country that's really successfully did that is North Korea, and they're not really like a great model to emulate. So I think any system that you come up with has to like either like Jeremy was saying, it has to either, you know, come up with some way to like unify, you know, all of the oppressed peoples on the planet and kind of come up with like this international system that, you know, is in opposition to like these colonial powers, or you have to figure out a way to like satisfy the colonial powers to some extent so that they don't interfere with your internal governments. And that's, I mean, right now I feel like a lot of countries are going towards the latter because they're run by, like, you know, the bourgeois. For example, I mean, the thing that always comes up for me is Lee Kuan Yew, who's like the founding father of Singapore, and that's basically what he did. Was he figured out like, okay, in order to have this internal sovereignty, then we just become like this really excellent, you know, like trading hub, and like we figure out how to like really latch on to the internationalist system, and we figure out how to like, you know, build this like incredible infrastructure, you know, really like provide for our people. And it's vaguely autocratic, you know, it's not really democratic, but it gives at least some level of internal sovereignty. And the question is like, okay, like a lot of other countries are looking at this and they're like, okay, like, you know, maybe we latch onto China or we latch onto the international system in some other way so that we can actually like preserve like our internal sovereignty, because, you know, like I just don't see escaping from geopolitics. I think that's something that like, I mean, it's just a matter of like a force where it's like, yeah, I mean, like you do really good things for your people. I guess Cuba's another good example of like kind of like, but they latched on to the USSR. So I feel like, I feel like you can't escape geopolitics.
Yeah. We have about 10 minutes left. I did want to go over kind of just like do an overview of the book, but I also want to talk about what we're going to be reading next. So would you guys be okay with just skipping to what we're going to read next, or does anyone feel like really strongly about doing an overview?
I think we kind of did a jumbled but overview just now, kind of when you come to the conclusion of the book.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we should totally jump to like what we're going to read next, because you know, we talked about a lot, and it's like, I know there are so many books out there that there's a bunch of stuff that I'm like looking forward to hearing about what y'all think we should go.
Okay, cool. All right, so if you just jump over to the stream, if you're not already there, we can see a reading list. And Sam also has another really interesting book that he wanted to add on there. And what was it called again?
It's Make Rojava Green Again. It's by Debbie Bookchin.
Green Again, and it's by Debbie Bookchin, who is Murray Bookchin's daughter. So that's pretty cool. So the Rojava it's really Sam wrote a really cool article about the Rojava if you haven't already like taken a look at it, but it's really interesting. They have their own autonomous zone, and I just think they're a really important group of people to look at because they're kind of doing or trying to like practice like socialism. I don't know exactly what ideology to call it. Maybe if you want to go into that, Sam, a little bit. I feel like I'm using the wrong terms.
Yeah, I mean, I would call it socialism just because you can call a lot of things socialism.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's the idea is kind of, I don't know, you could say like maybe like libertarian, socialist, municipalism. That's the word. But yeah, just kind of like bringing like local control, trying to like involve more direct democracy. So kind of like solving. So the what they call it is democratic confederalism. Basically, what confederalism is that problems are solved at the local level first. So like the local level is more powerful. In federalism, like in the United States, than like the federal government. So like the higher levels of administration, they're either more powerful or they're like theoretically they're just as powerful as the local administration. But in practice, they're actually more powerful. Whereas in confederalism, the idea is like, okay, at the lowest level, you can get people to, work together. You can actually implement direct democracy. And if you get like these different organizations where like minorities are represented and, like labor interests are represented, then you can actually, solve these problems with like the tyranny of the majority and stuff like that. And you can actually like, if you solve problems at the local level first, then you can involve more direct democracy and like more of, I think basically what Fanon is kind of talking about, like actually giving like the people the ability to control their own destinies and to like determine, self-determination. So I think it's a really, really exciting project.
Yeah, that sounds so awesome. And I also think it's great to like be able to read real places that are doing these things because, I mean, there's just so much theory on this kind of stuff, and it would be really cool to read on people who are actually like living out that theory. So that's Make Rojava Green Again. Next, we have the philosophy of social ecology.
Quick question though.
Yeah.
Sorry, do you know if it has an audiobook? Because then I'll be like super sold on it.
Let's find out.
I don't know.
Make Rojava Green Again. It doesn't look like it does. Do you use, I know this isn't as fun, but do you use a text reader?
Yeah, occasionally.
I can also read it out loud and record it since I'm reading it anyways.
Word, that would be awesome.
Okay, cool.
It is on I think this is a version of it on YouTube, Audible Anarchist. I think it's being read there.
Oh.
You can see chapters 1, introduction, chapter 1, 2, 3. They have the forward there. Audible Anarchist is the YouTube channel.
Wow. So you can just do that? You can just make videos where you read a book and you're not going to, like, get in trouble?
I hope so.
I want to do that.
Shout them out. I don't know if you're still streaming.
I should have just done that for Fanon. Oh, I am still streaming. Maybe I should end the stream. Hold on. Ooh, there's comment. Oh, Clark says the audio's working. Thanks, Clark. Okay, Turtle and Bear. Morality is constructed by communities, and overarching morality that we as a nation culture have is constructed by the ruling class. Yeah. AI itself might not have prejudices, but as Curse Queen said, the ones who control the AI do as well as the one who coded the AI. Yeah, totally. That's also an issue. Okay, also jumping back to this, I do feel like, because we did talk about like capitalism, I took this class that was talking about the ethics of technology, and it never brought up capitalism. And I think that's a massive issue because I think a lot of our social media, for example, wouldn't be so evil if it wasn't driven by capitalism, because social media wants us to get into conflict, so it makes our lives hell, but then we stay on it more, and it does that for ad revenue. So it's like all these, so many issues with technology comes down to capitalism. And if we could have technology in a world where the goal wasn't to make the most money, I think technology could be very beneficial. That's not the world we're in. So Volti, yeah, it'd be Star Trek. So Volti M says North Korea was dependent on the socialist bloc and now on China. I'm pretty sure that's true. I don't know much about North Korea. I'm very ashamed to say. And then Turtle Bear says, yeah, Volti was about to say there's a lot of economic traffic between North Korea and China. Okay, so that seems to be confirmed. And then they just kind of have a conversation about that. So yeah, everyone who's watching the stream, if there is anyone watching, there's a few people. I'm just going to end it here because we're talking about what we're going to discuss for a book club and what we're going to read next. But we have a really great list coming up, and I just don't know if that's going to be as interesting. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna stream this. I think talking about the list is going to be really interesting. Psych, just kidding. So for anyone listening, yeah. So I'll just keep going down the reading suggestions. So The Philosophy of Social Ecology is written by Murray Bookchin. I've been wanting to read this book for a long time. I feel like Murray Bookchin can kind of basically get a lot of the good stuff out of Peter Kropotkin without the racism, because I feel like we tried to read Mutual Aid, right?
Yeah, it was Mutual Aid.
We tried to read Mutual Aid.
It
Sucked. Mutual Aid sucked. Like, read it because it's a classic, but it sucked.
Also, we can't. I don't know if I'm the only one. I can't see the list of the new readings.
Oh, the stream stopped.
Stop the stream, but yeah.
Share your screen. My bad.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Also, I sent a request to add another thing there. I don't know, but I don't think I have.
Is it in the text chat?
In the doc thing. I don't know.
Oh, it's just in the doc. Okay, cool.
Well, yeah.
Wait, you still have to request it?
Well, yeah, because I don't have access to it.
Oh, hold on. Let me change the access. So anyone on the internet can view, but I want anyone on the internet to be able to edit it. There we go. Okay. Bada boom, bada bing. But yeah.
I think if you need the audiobooks, Jeremy, I think Audible Anarchist, he has at least 2 of the books that are here that he's read already.
And also, just let me know, because since I'm reading them anyways, I don't mind just reading them out loud. I actually love reading books out loud. Whenever I was in school and, like, you have to read, I'd be like, ooh, I'm going to read out loud. So, just let me know. If there's not an audiobook, I would be happy to just read it out loud, because I know the text readers are really dry and they're just not the best to listen to. Okay, so Saber. Wait, Saber, did you add this?
Yeah, I did.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about it? The Dawning of the Apocalypse.
So it's the title was The Dawning of the Apocalypse. Slavery, white supremacy, settler colonialism, and capitalism in the long 16th century. And that's by Gerald Thorne. He seems to be a sort of bottomless pit of knowledge. I don't know how he remembers all the stuff he remembers, but he really does go and talk about the origins of whiteness and how that morphed into white supremacy and all that kind of stuff. And he also speaks about the influence of the Ottoman Empire as well, and how that kind of forced Europe westward, which is maybe one of the reasons why Columbus had stumbled upon the so-called New World in the first place, and how it was trying to circumvent them in that way and ended up getting lost or whatever. But in this, he also speaks heavily about the various collaborations that kind of happened between the various European countries, and how they kind of pushed aside England, for example, pushed aside the religious differences, whereas the Spanish sort of emphasized the religious differences, and what that kind of turned into, from what he said, is that England was basically able to rally Europe around their whiteness, whereas the Spanish were sort of locked into sort of Catholicism, which was far more strict and didn't really allow for like the sort of allow for like Protestants to be sort of collaborate on a larger scale with Protestants. And yeah, he kind of talks about, like, he also speaks about the collaborations and indigenous peoples as well, and how, like, from the very, very beginning, in the 15th century and the 16th century, how, they were basically, like, revolting together, like, from the very, very beginning. So it kind of, like, puts to bed this idea that, like, we were just, sitting there doing nothing whilst we were being annihilated and enslaved and stuff like that. So, yeah, very, very interesting. But I haven't finished it yet. But, yeah, I'd definitely down to, like, start it over and get through it. Anyone wants to go for that. But if not, all the other books on the list also seem pretty interesting as well. So, yeah.
Well, I'm hoping one day we can just get through the list, even though we read books very slowly. But that sounds awesome.
Gerald Horn is probably my favorite currently living theorist right now.
This Gerald's home?
Horn.
Oh, Horn! Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so the next one is The Philosophy of Social Ecology by Murray Bookchin. So I haven't read anything by Bookchin yet, but I hear that the way that he talks about, well, first off, social ecology, for example, is like, from what I understand, is like talking about like how we can live socially. So like there's like a lot of talk about like how to plan cities in a way where it actually promotes like human relationship and also sustainability with the environment, but also connection to nature. And so when he talks about all these things, it's in a very like tangible way. It's like not just like this like theory that's over here. It seems like things that you can put into practice. I haven't read anything by him, but that's what I hear. And I'm really interested in like how to live life in a way that I can put these things into practice and not just read theory. So that's why I'm interested in him. He is white, but I'm still interested. And then The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter Goodwin Woodson. Someone told me to read this book, so I actually don't know much about it. But just the name of it, The Miseducation of the Negro, just that sounds pretty interesting to me. The Possessive Investment of Whiteness.
Oh, by the way, he's the one that basically started Negro History Week, that kind of morphed into Black History Week.
Oh, cool. So yeah, that seems very like important. Yeah, so The Possessive Investment of Whiteness by George Lipsitz. It's an essay, so it's going to be a shorter read. We could probably do it in 1 or 2 sittings. But I really found this essay helpful because it's really helped explain what whiteness is, why white people are invested in whiteness, and it just, I don't know, it's like a very succinct essay that seems to really help, and it does it by giving the historical record. So it's just very like, this thing happened, and this happened, and this happened, and to me, it's very helpful seeing the historical record because it's not really philosophical. It's like, well, this is what's going on. And understanding things in those terms, especially racially, was just super helpful. The Uses of Anger by Audre Lorde. This is the only thing I've read by Audre Lorde. I want to read more of her, but this is also an essay, and I loved this essay because it talks about, because like you have that whole thing where it's like, why are Black people so angry? And I feel like a lot of people kind of feel ashamed about being angry, like, oh, I'm not angry, or like, I'm not upset. But this essay is like, anger is a really useful emotion, and listen to it, and it's going to tell you some really important stuff. So that one's a short essay. We could definitely just do that one in one sitting if you want to do something short. Next up, we have Ujamaa by Julius Nyerere. I probably said that a little bit off, but basically, from what I understand, I believe, I could be getting the theory wrong, but I believe Nyerere, this person, I believe, is an anarcho-syndicalist. Do you know, Lecton?
I hadn't heard him described that way. As far as I know, it's just like, focusing on trying to describe an ethnic socialism. And I think that's what it was described to me.
Yeah. Okay. But he is one of those people who's like has like led a movement, and so from what I understand, reading Ujamaa is something where you could like actually again see people doing socialism in practice as opposed to just reading theories about it. And I really want to read this book at some point. Any of the books where it's like how to do stuff, like people who are actually doing stuff as opposed to just theorizing about it. I really want to read those. And also, like, especially like by Black people or just people of color, like I kind of get annoyed about, like, you know, how people like love Kropotkin and like Karl Marx and Engels, and they're just like these white dudes. And I just feel like there's like so much else going on. Not that they're not important or anything. It's just like, I just feel like it's kind of just, I just want to read some stuff by like non-white people. But I'm also open to like white people. So Kwame Nkrumah, oh, okay. But thanks. The Father of African Nationalism by David Birmingham. That is one that I really want to read because I want to understand more about African nationalism. And I feel like it's extra relevant, like in this way where like white people keep on talking about African nationalism like online. They just have no idea what it is. And it's just really funny. So I think it would be like cool to read more about African nationalism. And then just as a Black person, I obviously want to get more into African nationalism, and just be proud to be Black. So another one is We Will Not Cancel Us by Adrienne Marie Brown, who is a person of color. I think she actually is Black, but I can't remember her race. But I thought this was interesting too, especially since we're all online so much, just talking about cancel culture. And I think it would be interesting to hear it from the perspective of a person of color, because when white people talk about it, I'm kind of just like, I don't know. I just feel like the people that I hear, like the white people that I hear complaining about it a lot of times, it's just like, there's a way where it doesn't necessarily like seem so bad, and it kind of just seems like there's a way where like people kind of, it's the like not the only oppression they faced, but there's a way where like I've heard, like especially when I hear like white comedians, like white guy comedians complain about cancel culture, it's like, oh, this is the only form of oppression that you're experiencing, and you don't know how to interact with it because you haven't ever actually faced people truly being shitty to you on a systemic level. But of course, like I've seen people get canceled and like be, you know, harassed online. And I just think it's a really fascinating thing because like we're all online. This is a YouTube channel right here. So it's just interesting. And it's also a very short read. We could probably finish it in 2 or 3 book clubs. And yeah, so that's the list.
Honestly, I think we could finish it in 1. It's very short.
Okay, we could probably finish it in 1. I'm going to stop the stream there since we kind of like went over the books. So anyone who is still watching, thank you so much. And we'll see you in the next book club.